Hello, and thank you for coming to our research study on social responsibility in businesses. This was conducted by myself, Christopher Daley. I'm a financial investments major, and it was under the supervision of Dr. Justin Mattis and Dr. Dean Freer. The question was simple. What are the attitudes and behaviors of a business community in terms of social responsibility? We decided to look at how businesses act in terms of social habits regarding charity, environmental practices, and other social behaviors. This would tell us that based on the actions of the businesses, how socially concerned they are, and the measures that are being taken in those respective areas. This would later stem to the question, is social responsibility common in only certain facets, such as charity and maybe not so much environmental practices? Or is it relatively rounded across all areas? We decided to answer this question by a convenient sample of members of local business organizations. They were sent an email link to the survey consisting of 26 questions. Our survey was sent to 400 members, and we had a total of 43 respondents, giving us about a 10% response rate. The answers were categorical with respective numerical values assigned to each category. So the answers could be broken down as data sets and inputted through software analysis, which would help us later draw our inferences, conclusions, and correlations amongst the data. The demographics of the responses were as follows. Of the 43 respondents, more than 67% aged over 50 years old, with only 16.3% under 40 years old. There was a majority of females with 60.5% responding and only 39.5% of males responding. Of the entire pool, however, 81.4% achieved a bachelor's degree or higher, showing that higher education was a strong trend amongst the business owners and or those who responded for the businesses. When it comes to the businesses surveyed, 15 responded that they were the founder, with 26 responding that they weren't the founder, and 2 not responding to this question at all. The businesses are a majority over 20 years old, with only 27.9% being under 10 years old. A majority of the businesses also had less than 25 employees, so being relatively on the smaller side, but as a majority are profitable to some degree, with only 16.3% being either unprofitable or just barely breaking even. When asked about social responsibility, here were our results. When asked how important is it for you personally to be socially responsible, the vast majority, 28 out of 43 or 65.1% responded that it was very important, with 7 responding that they weren't sure and 8 responding that it was just important. Regarding to what the businesses do to be socially responsible, we then asked if the business had a formal community outreach program, with 29 responding that it was not important at all, and only 13 responding yes and 1 responding no. It became apparent that in terms of community outreach programs, that area of social responsibility hadn't been looked into by businesses as a whole overall. We then asked on average how many times the business per month gets requests for financial support from nonprofit organizations, and there was a relatively even spread. 6 responded never, 16 responded once or twice a month, 8 responded 3 to 5 times a month, and 13 responded more than 5 times a month. We then got into the environmental questions. Our first was regarding cycling. When asked how often do you protect the environment through a recycling program, there was a steep upward trend, with only 1 response responding never, 7 saying sometimes, 13 saying almost always, and 22 saying always. It showed that for the majority of times, when it comes to recycling programs, local businesses are more than willing to comply and do their part. When asked about solar energy, however, it was quite the opposite. When asked how often do you protect the environment through investing in solar energy, 38 of the 43 responded never, with only 3 responding sometimes and 2 responding almost always, and not a single response being always. When asked how common diversity training is and if it is regularly engaged, it was a similar response, with 16 responding never and 17 responding sometimes, making up the vast majority, with only 4 responding almost always, and 4 again responding always, and 2 not answering this question. When it comes to the likelihood to donate charities, it was separated into 2 categories, where they are being asked to donate to the charity and when they have scheduled donations to the charity, either monthly or quarterly. When they are asked directly, 16% say that they never engage in charitable donations, 8 say that they sometimes engage in charitable donations, 8 said that they almost always did, and when asked, 11 said that they always engaged in charitable donations. When it comes to scheduled donations, there were only 7 that never engage in it, 10 that sometimes engage in it, 10 that almost always engage in it, and 15% always engaging in charitable donations. When asked how likely these business owners are to support different nonprofits, our answer was quite interesting. We asked amongst civil, educational, food bank, environmental, religious, and sports-related nonprofits whether they were very unlikely, unlikely, likely, or very likely to support them. When it comes to civic, there is a relatively even upward trend, with only 6 saying that they are very unlikely and 15 saying that they were very likely. Educational was our most interesting report, with only 1 responding that they were very unlikely, another singular person responding that they were just unlikely, and 26 responding that they were likely, followed with 15 reporting that they were very likely. The food bank trend was similar but not as dramatic, with 1 responding that they were very unlikely, 6 responding that they were just unlikely, 17 responding that they were likely, and 19 responding that they were very likely. Environmental followed a typical bell-shaped curve, with 3 responding that they were very unlikely, 12 responding that they were unlikely, 18 responding that they were likely, and 11 responding that they were very likely. Religious was similar, as was sports. We found this to be extremely interesting because, if you remember, 81.4% were highly educated, and here we see that educational nonprofits are by far the most supported and most likely to be supported. Based on these overall results, we found some consistencies. Across all respondents, it seems that there is more of a willingness if the costs are cheaper. If we go back to the slides regarding recycling and solar, we see that with recycling typically being cheap and an inexpensive way to help the environment, many people are more than likely to contribute and do their fair share. When it comes to investing in solar, however, as we learned, it's quite the opposite, with solar being known for being extremely expensive and costly, and most likely not paying back and being a worthy investment for decades to come. Most businesses were also willing to make charitable donations, but it was more common for them if they are asked. So the question has to be asked if charitable donations are really that charitable if they needed to be asked for them. These businesses are also willing to support nonprofits across the board, but with a strong support for educational nonprofits, as seen in the previous chart. So what does this tell us? This tells us that businesses are relatively socially responsible, but most commonly when the costs of being socially responsible are low. Businesses that are socially responsible tend to support nonprofits overall with a large emphasis on education. And it was also found that those who supported one area of social responsibility typically stemmed into the other areas with an equal level of support. The overall conclusion reached is that based on the data, it appears that there is a correlation in that if a business acts in one form of social responsibility, typically they also act in the others as well, with the only outlier being solar, as we discussed. There were some weaknesses for the study that need to be realized, such as our small sample size and our low response rate, as well as the non-representative sample. As we talked about, most of our samples were small businesses with less than 25 employees, so we didn't really sample all scopes of the businesses. If there are any questions about this study, please feel free to email me at christopher.daley@wilkes.edu. Thank you very much for coming to our research study, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium.